Welcome back to Core Ideas, the podcast interested in all things related to lake sediments and paleolimnology. My name is Adam Jeziorski, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Josh Steenpont.
How are you, Adam?
I'm doing pretty good.
Here, quite literally.
Yeah, the always was a bit of a lie. For the very first time in the history of the show, we are in the same room while recording.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
I guess that's what happens when you start a podcast project 2 months before a global pandemic. And I guess the pandemic's still going, but I'm confident now, having had a bout of COVID and multiple vaccines, and the world has opened up quite a bit. That this is what the plan was always to do periodically.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hell of a drive. We probably won't be doing this for every episode, but it's good and a fitting one for this one to record. And we actually are going to record a second episode that will probably come out first, but this is the first time we've recorded anything in the same room.
Yeah.
So let's kick it off with something cool.
Yeah, because today we're celebrating 2 full years of the podcast and decided to have another anniversary/reflection episode to look back on what was accomplished, what wasn't, and take a little bit of a look going forward and just kind of review what we thought worked and what we didn't, and take it from there.
Year 2 in review. Yep.
Year 2 in review. Although we're not really, I guess the first anniversary episode we called 1 full VARV. We're really more at like 2 and a bit VARVs right now, because the anniversary would have been in the spring. But we're in the same room, and we felt like celebrating something, and this is all we could think of. Yeah,
I mean, we always intended to have more of a recap than a true celebration of the year, but this is as good an excuse as any.
So I think for anyone, maybe our dedicated listener,
shout out.
There's definitely an activity drop-off when there was about 26 episodes in year 1 versus 20-ish in year 2.5, or
you're in the year and a half following that, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess on a productivity level, welcome to the sophomore slump.
It's a thing. I mean, it happens with all shows probably. Isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you were like making a TV analogy, there'd be the pilot, and usually the first season is a little short.
We're finding our feet, I guess. And in terms of reviewing, so the first year ended kind of in the middle of Arc 5, which is topical paleolimnology. Then we followed that up with the small picture and conceptual rabbit holes, which is almost complete. We've got 1 more episode to record for that. And I guess we came out of the gate in year 1 with a whole pile of ideas and banged them off, and had a whole bunch of guests because we spoke to Jenny, John, Matt, and Liz in year 1.
Yep.
And with no guests this year.
No, again, a little bit circumstantial related to the way of the world, and some other changes that just ended up happening at the same time that resulted in that being the case. But so 3 arcs kind of more or less completed, and we did 4 in the first thing, and we did have some material put away already to start the first season, year, whatever. So I think that's not too bad, considering it is a side project. No one's getting paid to do this. We don't have a full-time producer. So overall, from a productivity perspective, maybe a little bit lower, but not bad in the end.
I think so.
The guest thing is a little bit, that was one of our goals in the first year review, is to have some more guests, but I think circumstances were a little bit different, which we can continue talking about. So
yeah, no, we definitely had plans initially to take the show on the road and interview a couple people at conferences, and I have not been to a conference in 3 years.
No, if you're listening to this though, and you're going to be at the International Paleolimnology Association meeting in the end of November, I am also going to be there. I don't know if I'll bring my podcasting gear. I think I might be too ambitious to cart all that stuff all the way to Argentina. But You could convince me quite easily to do so. If you are listening and you're going to be there and you want to chat for a few minutes for the podcast, we could maybe do that. Just send us an email and it'll be probably a one-sided conversation from the two of us, but an option. But yeah, we did think about that. That might be coming up even into 2022, 2020, late 2021. So, and that didn't materialize.
Okay. But yeah, no. So we just kind of rolled with the flow. You know, I think we settled on the idea of arcs kind of thing in response to the pandemic. And just like, what are we going to talk about next? Is this going to be all lecture? All our ideas are thrown out of the window. And
yeah,
it's like, if you build it, they will come. Our listenership is definitely ramped up.
Yeah, big time. That's a big positive difference. We may have done less episodes, but we've been heard by more people.
Yep. And even though we are still super niche, so I don't know if the response then is to double down and go nichier.
You want less listeners. Is that what it is? Okay, sure. Well, I don't think there's that many people. But yeah, no, good. We could. And we may. You never know, because we really are not planning it in advance.
No. And I thought, looking at the listenership, it was kind of really interesting that one or two of the episodes seem to have been flagged by, we're guessing, some sort of class in some respect, based on a huge flux of listens from one region in 1 week.
Yep.
And I don't know if I thought that would be the kind of thing that would ever happen. Like, no, I was just like casual grad student microscope listening was always the goal, but I think that's super neat.
I think that is, well, that's what happens when you have coming up on 50 episodes. You can kind of dive into the analytics a little bit. So thinking about which episodes are particularly popular across the board, and then those more random kind of occurrences where an episode just gets picked up really significantly in one town in Ohio. I don't know if it's Ohio, just picking a place out of the blue, but clearly associated with a university, maybe a graduate class, a senior undergraduate class. It is pretty cool. And no, I did not think that was going to be the use of any episode. So it's neat that 2 or 3 of them have been used that way.
Yeah. And so I guess that is where we could go nichier going forward if we chose to, because it definitely seems, and I did not think this would be the case, that there'd be a preference for lecture episodes over more of our rambly idea, like the conceptual rabbit hole kind of themes of just pulling a bunch of kind of ideas together versus let's talk for an hour about diatoms or let's talk for an hour about chironomids.
Yeah.
Yet those seem to be the ones that seem to get the most listens.
Agreed. It does seem that way. And I don't think it's a function of like the time of year, because this most recent arc has come out in the summer when maybe people are less engaged in podcast listening. They're in the field doing other things like that. But going to the whole back catalog, it does seem the methodological method ones do come out as the most listened to ones. So maybe people are using it to study more than to engage in or listen to our engaged conversations on weird topics.
Yeah.
We never get any mail, so it's really hard to gain feedback except for a posterior kind of feedback.
Yeah. And those lecture episodes, there's so much more work.
They are, yeah. So we'll keep making them, but we have to throw in some of the more rambly, just ideas things, because it takes so much more.
Third year slump will be even bigger.
Yeah, yeah. And we've kind of settled onto this 1 a month kind of time frame, and I think that's even the ones that require quite a bit of energy to prepare for and to not script per se, but to really organize the thoughts of, can be done at that rate. So that seems likely to continue at that sort of pace. But yeah, those ones do take a lot more work. Okay. It take 2 or 3 planning sessions to get to one episode.
Yeah. And then one thing I kind of wanted to do is in our year 1 reflection, we made a bunch of action items to look forward to the future.
I like you call them action items and not plans, because we didn't really plan to do them. We just listed off things that might be nice.
That we would like to do.
Yep.
And it definitely was in the vein of like to do versus need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so Let's just run through them.
Okay.
We were going to get some swag.
Nope. Failed that.
We failed that one. We still don't have any t-shirts.
But
Our
we
stickers
we
are
did
in.
talk about it.
We've talked
we
about it a
did
couple
more
times.
planning, and in some ways it's good because we rebranded the podcast. It's no longer a paleolimnology podcast. It's the paleo. So how embarrassing would it be to have the T-shirt with the wrong name on it?
That is a good point.
Yeah. So I think moving forward we can check that off. I will bring some swag to the paleo meeting in Argentina. Hit me up and I might have stickers or.
Yeah, we'll have to
A t-shirt
have
or
a
two.
code word or
Yeah.
something.
A
Closer
code
to
word,
the time.
It's like, I listen to the show and I'll just dump all this stuff on you. No. I don't want to get this crap. Anyway, we will get that. And there's been some work towards that.
All right. Action item number 2 is improve the website and finish the glossary.
Well, I don't have anything to do with that, so I can't claim contribution in any way. So my apologies.
That was a mega fail.
Was it?
The website was down for quite a chunk of the last year,
Right.
due to behind the scenes upgrades gone awry and
Completely beyond your control.
me
Nothing.
not knowing anything about fixing it. But it is back up again, and we should be able to make some more progress and improvements going forward. But before then, we've got like about a year's worth of stuff to catch up on
Yeah.
in terms of the blog posts. And I fell into the trap of putting a lot more effort into blog posts.
Well, they're
as
very
we went
good.
down. So looking at year 1s versus like early year 2s is like, holy moly.
Yeah.
It definitely changed from show notes to blog posts.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. And they'll probably go in a different direction as we try and catch up on some of the back catalog. But the glossary is really one of the most like useful things associated with that. And that kind of gets updated as you go through them as well. And it's already like you get to the point where you just reuse terminology. So it is fairly complete, even if it's not associated with every episode. The glossary itself is already pretty functional. So I wouldn't say that's a complete fail just based on the fact that that exists already and had a lot there. So the glossary part, yes. The blog posts, maybe not yet. So I'm going to give you a little bit of credit back on that one.
All right.
You're self-deprecating.
I will
there.
take it.
Yeah.
I will take it. Item 3 was get better at interviewing and take the show on the road.
Double
to PALS
fail.
2022.
Double fail there. Yep. Oops.
All right. Action item 4 was record a show sitting in the same room.
Hey.
Check 1 for the good guys.
Cheers. We did it.
Cheers. Yeah, no, reviewing that list was terribly depressing, so let's not make another one.
Okay, that's a good idea. This episode will have no foresight of any kind other than to continue making podcasts.
Yep. And then on the more neutral things, we are still terrible at social media and self-promotion. But
Yep. But we always admitted we were never going to improve at that.
No.
We did a whole episode on why we sucked at that.
And I think the audio quality, at least on my end, has improved
Oh,
over the
100%.
course of the show.
For sure. If anything, like your work is getting harder because the websites become more in depth, like the blog posts become, beyond the technical issues, but just the actual content of those is harder. And mine's becoming easier because editing your audio has become very straightforward. I have basically a plugin. I'm like, Adam EQ, just make him sound really sexy. And that's it.
All right.
It's good. I don't know how this will be because we're recording live on a totally different device. I have a different microphone. I probably don't even sound like the same person. So we'll see. But otherwise, it's been really good.
Okay. But yeah, no, definitely a lot of learning in year 2.
Yeah.
Things I didn't want to learn about in terms of
Yeah, for sure.
website backends. But
And the content. We were talking about it takes longer to put them together, and that's because we can't just pull them out of our own minds. So there's research and reading and preparation on the topics. It's not just a fieldwork stories episode, which was probably the easiest
we
put
should
together.
do another one.
We
of
should
those.
do another fieldwork episode. It's one of the better listened to ones too.
Yeah.
So overall, there has been a lot of learning. I think that would be a good summary of the year.
Okay. And then next thing I had on my list to talk about, so we had a bit of reflection of what we did not do.
Mhm.
We had some challenges. The website, as mentioned, was broken for quite a while.
Yeah.
There were 2 separate COVID breaks,
One each.
one each.
Yep. Great. perfect.
And that knocked us out for a while.
Mhm.
There's a bit of floundering because we don't really have a good way to get a sense of well-received versus less well-received episodes.
Mhm.
And we definitely started, not just on the back end, started preparing way more. I was like shocked when I reviewed their preparatory notes
Yeah.
for stuff in year one. I don't know if that, I've not come back and really listened to old episodes, but we definitely flew by the seat of our pants way more than has been the case in the last little while.
Big time. There's more notes for this review episode than there were for whole episodes on like scientific topics like hold my beer. I'm going to try and explain transfer functions without without visuals.
Yeah.
That's a very poorly noted episode considering what we were trying to do with it. There are far more notes about this today, and this is going to be like 20 minutes in total.
Yeah.
So and I think it's just that we know those topics pretty well and didn't know what we needed to get through an episode, and they are a little bit more all over the place. And it's not to say the new episodes aren't all over the place sometimes, but that's kind of built in some ways. Like that's not an accident necessarily.
Yeah, no, it's interesting in terms of the evolution and, you know, not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then the big one is we both got new jobs.
Yeah, I don't think we said that you had a new job. Maybe it's not new anymore. It's like a year
it's been
almost,
like
right?
years,
Yeah.
And it's a big deal because I'm not entirely sure if I'm still allowed to be a host on the Paleolimnology podcast because I'm not actually a working paleolimnologist anymore. Just cruising on my legacy at this point.
Well, I mean, I'm taking interest if people are putting in applications. No, we're not going to replace Adam. Of course, you can still be a paleolimnologist. I mean, that could almost be an episode. Like, do you have to be a practicing? What is a scientist? Like, just talk about this all the time in more popular Twitter kind of discussions on, you know, if you're not a professor, if you don't have a PhD, you're not a scientist. That's nonsense. If you know about the topic, you're interested in it and have an interest, you qualify as a scientist. And your science is still paleolimnology in the background, but it does make for some challenges. So, like, you have a day job. I mean, I have a day job too, but
I have a completely unrelated
as
to
an
this day
assistant
job.
professor. So I can qualify my time to, say, record a podcast. Like, that's arguably outreach. You could not take off an afternoon to record with some external guest who doesn't want to talk at 9:30 at night when we usually do. So that does present slight challenges for those kind of things, but not insurmountable ones, certainly not.
But we'll figure out. And then maybe there's another angle that we can come back in terms of my eyes being open a little bit because I'm working more in research administration now and reviewing grants, and there might be in future material to mine from there in terms of, and as you as well now as with a
tenure track position.
Tenure track position.
Yeah, we didn't actually say what our jobs are. So what's Adam's new job? Just in case we haven't talked about it, because I don't actually remember.
Yeah, no, my official title is I'm a research projects advisor. So I basically work in the grants office at Queen's now. And
there's lots to be learned from that.
Yeah, and like review, and so the thrust of my job is just providing grant support to faculty members from the full Faculty of Arts and Science.
It's huge. Yeah.
So
exactly.
So the world is much wider than I ever anticipated before, and you know, it's not when I'm reviewing a grant that is in like pure math. It's just a case of I have no insights to offer other than readability.
Yep.
And are you
checking for now? But I'm sure that's going to change as you become more familiar with those kind of applications. You know, this was your first math centered discovery grant application, but by the 30th, you will have something just to contribute to that, and then you'll be able to take and look at the generalizations from all of them and see what is successful and what's not. And I'm sure you're already getting to that point. Yeah. So there's lots to be learned there.
Yeah, and I don't know if there'd be any interest on well, I don't really care if there's any interest. We do the show for fun.
That's
But
right. Is there any interest on anything we talk about? The
but I
next
think there'll be
episode
stuff
of
to talk
Record is
about,
about
like,
data.
research funding in Canada is a huge element that I just was through the postdoc period and research
I'm interested.
professional period in a lab where I've worked on individual applications, but I didn't really have a good sense of the grant landscape. And I
Yep.
think there'll be some useful stuff out there for, both at the level of general interest, but then also for grad students looking to make the leap.
A
that,
PhD, like someone who's in their PhD. It's not something you think about. I didn't know any of that stuff, really.
No,
And I think we had a fairly open kind of funding discussion relationship in the lab that we did our graduate work in, more so than some people. Some people, it's a complete black box.
Yeah.
And you really don't get a ton of experience. And it does change all the time, which is the other thing.
yeah, and there's a lot more stuff out there than I ever realized,
Mhm.
and some of it is incredibly niche and not applicable. But just as a grad student or as a professor, there's a deluge of
Oh, yeah.
email list servers that you subscribe to, and picking out the key items can be quite difficult sometimes. Or like
For sure.
a sentence has to sell you on I'm going to click on this and then
Yeah.
go down a rabbit hole.
Or this is what it says, but this is really what it means. Those kind of things. Like I've only been doing my tenure track job for 3 weeks, I think, if you include the holiday break. And I've already on, a bunch of different interdisciplinary kind of cluster things, well beyond what I would have known of before, because you get looped into these networks or whatever collaborations, and just seeing how those can kind of fit into the whole big picture is hard, because you haven't been exposed to them before. So that's definitely something we can do. And my new job is basically the same. I'm still at York, in the same unit in the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change, but I have a tenure track position, which is much more kind of standard.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And to you too.
Yep. So we'll have to update the website
We will, yeah.
to
yeah.
reflect that, because it is now very much out of date. All right. So
All right.
talking about
Good 20-minute update on the podcast.
so going forward.
Yes. Yeah. What's next?
Yeah. We've lost all our listeners in this particular episode. Is skipping ahead to them talking about nothing. of
Yeah, we should put a
substance here.
big marker in this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll do a little note at the beginning. Like, if you don't care about this reminiscing stuff, skip to whatever time,
Yeah.
and you'll hear what's next, or just tune in to the next one. Anyway,
So how about, for the very first time, we preview an ARC idea?
I like it.
So we've never done this before. It's always been very by the seats of our pants and hammer out a couple of episode ideas.
Yep.
But seeing as we've kind of been alternating between rambly conceptual topics versus more, I need to come up with better names for these, versus lecture type thematic, informative arcs.
Good episode. Good arcs.
Oh no, you know what?
No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
We're thinking of going ahead in the next little while, or I guess from your point of view, it could be months from now, but from our point of view, the next little while of an arc that we're going to call reading lists.
I'm excited about this topic. It's different. It's definitely different.
And we'll see if we draw people in or send them running. So it's really prompted by the timing of a new academic year. And this one, we thought, because it's a bigger deal than most due to the potential for, or I guess for more than the potential, the current plans for an on-campus return.
Widespread, exclusive, basically back to normal.
Yeah. And hopefully that comes to pass. And there's going to be a whole slew of new graduate students just starting.
Yep.
On countless topics. And we just got chatting about how building an initial reading list for a particular topic to get your background expertise so that you can understand how you're going to push this particular topic forward can be quite hard, especially when you're coming in at the ground floor. And how do you start?
Yeah, it's probably harder than it used to be. It's one of those things that, you have instant access to every article ever, effectively. Like the back catalog of science has more or less been digitized at this point, and you can get any article that you want. If you can't find it electronically now, you probably could find something instead.
It's
not
likely you'll skip it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whereas it might not have been so easy, or it might have been a little bit easier to see what is this really critical back literature, air quotes, back in the day. There may have been a file folder in the lab of these seminal papers on a given topic that you should go through. These are the places you would start. You go make a photocopy for yourself, and then you have that copy. But that may not exist anymore.
No. And I've definitely written a fair number of emails to prospective students, like in the first couple of days that arrived, of like, this is depending on what the specific master's project or PhD project they're working on. Like, if it's related to my own expertise, it's been like, here you go, here's the email. Sorry to bombard you with PDFs, but here is your starting point to build out from.
For sure. And exactly. The undergraduate students that I have starting, one of them is working in the summer. One of them is coming to start her thesis in September. I have a shared OneDrive, or you can do Dropbox or whatever your file server thing is, of these are some papers where I would start.
Yeah. And because a key theme is it's important to, one, not be overwhelming on day one. Like, I guess it doesn't really matter that much, but you don't want to be discouraging someone when they arrive in a new place and then go, here's 50 PDFs to work your way through. Yep. So there's usually a pretty selective list. And it's not always important to begin at the beginning. I think as putting this together, it's like in terms of examples, I think very few people out there would recommend to begin studying acid rain by going back to Smith 1892, where the book chapter that the phrase was coined in, or necessarily start working, if you're working genomics, is like go back to the Mendelian pea experiments
from the original
paper.
Original, exactly.
Because
journal entries,
because the key findings of many classics have percolated through the relevant literature, and then things like Mendel and stuff, even into popular culture.
Yeah.
And just because it is insightful and foundational doesn't mean it will always be the most illustrative / useful paper or whatever it might be for a new student.
Yeah, they may not be complete. The ideas have been improved upon or reanalyzed or whatever. They often are very short papers. They're not very exhaustive. Was it Watson and Crick Nature paper from 1963, I think, something
53.
Like that. 53 is like a page and a half, like a Nature paper is, and that's not where I would go to learn about the structure of DNA.
No, it's for people that are well versed in the hunt for the structure at the time.
Yeah.
And yes, and you mentioned earlier the process has gotten easier, so that can almost make it more overwhelming at times. It's very easy to do searches on Google Scholar of who has cited this paper versus who is cited in this paper. And those are just 2 clicks away to get full lists.
Yep.
And that can be quite illustrative and at the same time overwhelming. When I was a student, the digitization wall was a thing. There's a very big separation between what you could get digitally versus what you'd have to go to the book stacks in the library to find.
Yeah, me too, even.
I think that has pretty much been eliminated now. It just comes down to which journals you're subscribed to.
Which is a thing, true.
It's very much a thing in terms of limiting access. Because I definitely remember doing reading lists where I got 5 or 6 papers, able to find 5 of them. So, and then you look at and not all you're working from is a title.
Yeah.
Maybe not even the abstract. And so, am I going to go hunt for this one paper from 1963? Yeah. And sometimes the answer is yes. And depending on the day, sometimes the answer is no.
And yeah, exactly. And now the equivalent would be, am I going to email the author of this paper that I've read the abstract of? Yeah, maybe you will and maybe you won't.
Yeah. And that's something I did quite rarely, actually. But
I'm doing it more and more now.
Yeah. And I found
maybe I'm just more comfortable with it. You're not a master's student just sending an email to some other person, but it is becoming a thing.
Yeah, and I definitely there's a steady stream now of requests through ResearchGate for stuff. That
right.
I definitely
for sure.
So I guess I distribute stuff more that way than in terms of asking, but that is a pretty cool channel that was definitely not there.
Big time. And I think people are. I mean, we're getting a little off topic, but people are archiving preprints, or the accepted version before it's been paginated quite a bit more, especially as it's kind of linked to the funding model, at least here in Canada. But we can talk into some of these things later.
Yeah. All right. So we still need the launch points, And so we're going to try an arc that will choose 5 key papers a student would require to kick off their research in a series of fairly broad topics within paleolimnology.
Yep. But that could be quite challenging. Could be it would depend on the topic, and we've thought of a few topics, and we'll see how this goes and how hard it is. But I think we need some rules associated with that, because it could become small.
And then,
as much as I love reading,
we've
is
got our
writing.
bias.
Yeah.
Because,
Big
tied
time.
into that. And well, you know what? I'm biased, and that is stuff I'm more familiar with than others, and I don't care. And that's going to be part of it, because all these kind of recommended lists are going to, it's going to be what what I felt with the key papers. So we'll try and pull up a list of 5 papers and point out why we feel they are so important to the topic at hand.
Yep.
Trying to limit to no more than 1 review.
That's good. Yep. I think that's really useful, because primary research often, we say this all the time to students, like, reviews are great, but you should probably go and read the original paper in order to cite it. Unless you're citing it as a review.
Yeah. Does it matter if we're particularly reliant on a single author in that list?
I think it'll depend on the list, probably. We're going to try to not make it all one research group, because that's not a good place to jump off, because they may work in a single area, use a single method, all of those kind of things. I think there's a goal to try and spread it out geographically, time-wise, to some extent. But they still have to be seminal, so if it fits, that may still end up happening.
Yeah. We talked about a topic versus a proxy, because some are big, some are small, and the value curve of more papers diminishes the bigger, depending on how small niche the topic is.
Yeah.
But I don't know, we'll figure it out, because the topics aren't picked yet. And this is going to require a fair bit more homework than we normally do.
To some extent. I mean, to some extent, it's also just reading papers too, which is defined. So we won't be trying to find topics of different areas, and we'll have an idea, but it is going to be a little bit of a different kind of workflow to what we've done before.
So hopefully it's fun. And I think we'll start in our respective wheelhouses to make it easier in terms of
always do.
Already having the list. Hopefully we'll have the first couple of these to go in the fall. In late summer, early fall.
Yep.
In time for the new academic year.
And if you hear this and you have a topic, I mean, no one ever emails us or texts us, but if you have one, hey, we'll take some suggestions.
Shoot us a line. Absolutely. But yeah, overall, we still consider this podcast to be a fun project, and we intend to keep stumbling along on ever more esoteric topics. And we commit to nothing more than this not being the last episode of the podcast. But ideally, we'll be here for a while.
Yep, that's right.
And we will always suck at social media promotion, so don't expect to hear any meal kit ads anytime soon.
Wait, hang on a second. Didn't we already do that? Wasn't the helicopter meal things?
But we will sell out.
No one ever made a single comment on our fake advertisements.
It has to be tied into the code word somehow.
Yeah, I guess so.
For the true believers.
That's right. Granny Thenepont's Book of Knots. Or Audiobook of Knots, right. That's the weirdest of them all. It's no wonder we didn't do any after that. Christmas, indeed. All right, let's wrap this up.
Okay. So yeah, as always, thanks for listening to Core Ideas, the Paleolimnology podcast. If you have a question or a comment or a suggestion for a future show, such as the reading lists, please send us a note.
That's right. Ways you could reach us. Our email address is coreideaspodcast@gmail.com, and the Twitter handle is @coreideaspaleo with only one A in paleo. We read everything that you send us eventually. Don't expect an immediate reply, but we will get to it.
And an archive of our past episodes and show notes for many of them is maintained on our website at coreideas.hsyorski.ca. And the link is listed on our Twitter bio.
And if you're so inclined, you can give us a rating or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, wherever you get those podcasts. Those 5-star ratings are great. Comments are even better, because it's nice to know who the listeners are. But to be honest, we just do this for fun. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, and that's it for today. But we'll be back soon to explore another paleolimnological topic, sticking to our ethos of pure knowledge without the economy.